Greetings from New York City and Columbia Business School Executive Education. My name is Scott Gardner, and I'm here with Professor David Rogers for the Transform Your Business to Compete in the Digital Age webinar. Before I introduce David, I'd like to quickly go over just a few logistics. A recording of this session will be emailed to you after the webinar. We encourage you to use the Q&A box throughout this session, and we will get to as many of those questions as possible at the last part of the seminar. Finally, if you'd like to tweet about this experience, please use our Twitter handle, #CBSExecEd. So it's great to be with you today, David. David is a globally recognized leader on brands and digital business strategy. He is the faculty director of 2 executive education programs at Columbia Business School, Digital Business Strategy and Digital Marketing Strategy, and the author of the international best-selling book, The Digital Transformation Playbook. It's great to be with you, David.
Great to be with you, Scott.
So let me ask you, there's been a lot of talk in the last 12 months about digital transformation.
Yes.
What do we mean by digital transformation?
Good question. It seems sometimes you get up in front of a conference and if you ask the audience, everyone would have a slightly different definition. To me, digital transformation is really a question. And that question is, how does a business that was started before the digital era, really what a point that grew to scale before the digital era, how does that kind of business need to adapt, to evolve in order to reach that next stage of profitable growth in the digital economy? All right? And the key point here is it is a different question than how do I build a great startup? How do I launch the next Uber? That's a matter of looking at the world around you, consumer trends, behaviors, new opportunities, seizing an opportunity to create some value. Okay, this is an idea for a new business. Rather, how do you take an existing business that has customers, that has a brand reputation, that has distribution channels, has organizational structures and talent and capabilities inside? How does that business actually change? Right? And both it has certain assets going for it, right? It has skills, capabilities, knowledge of its customers, reputation, but it also has certain encumbrances, if you will. And it really starts with a shift in the mindset of how you learn to think as a business, much more than it is about a change in any technologies you're deploying.
Right, well, great. Now we're on the topic of mindset. You did a video for us called In the Digital Era, Growth is About More Than Technology. So let's play that video, and afterwards I have a few questions for you.
Right. Companies are like people, and we grow up and our own experiences literally shape the wiring inside our brains as our neurons form as we grow into adulthood. And that gives us skills and intuition and ability to seize opportunities and examine things, but it also blinds us to a lot of things around us. So if your company grew up in a completely different analog era, that's how you grew and how you established your distribution channels and you built your brand and you learned who your customers were and you learned how to make money, then you are now operating in a completely different environment. The hardest part is to identify those assumptions in your strategic thinking. How do we learn to adapt and evolve our business in a way that we are going to continue to grow in the digital age, an economy that is so characterized and transformed by these successive waves of digital technologies? Now that challenge is fundamentally different, what I would call a digital transformation, from starting a new business. To say we have a company that's already in existence and we need to transform. We need to figure out how do we move into this next future. It's not about what technology you're using and how you deploy it and all those sort of aspects. The hard part is actually about strategy, about leadership, and about new ways of thinking. And we look at this by looking at 5 broad domains of strategy. Customers, to rethink competition, to rethink data, innovation, and value. What is your value to the marketplace? And if we can use these as a way to understand how the strategy rulebook for every business has changed in the digital era, and that we're playing by rules we don't even realize we learned. We've absorbed them, and that is shaping every business decision we make. And if we can learn to step back, relearn some of that thinking, any business can start to identify opportunities for growth and new value creation that are going to move them beyond what they've done in the past and lead them into the next stage of digital growth for their company.
Great, that was wonderful. So in the video, you talk about areas of strategy that businesses really need to think about differently.
Right.
So can you talk further about those 5 domains?
Yeah, so 5 domains of strategy. Each of these are areas where we need to shift our thinking as a business. First is customers, right? What is our relationship to our customers? And companies that were around in the pre-digital era need to start thinking about customers not as targets who you market to and deliver projects to and sort of persuade, much more as a network, that is dynamically connected. Your customers are connected to you, they're connected to each other, they're connected to all the same digital tools as you are, which gives them information at their fingertips, the ability to spread and share ideas. And so it requires a very sort of a rethinking fundamentally of how do I relate to these customers? How do I create value for them, but also maybe with them? And how do I meet their needs when they're in so many more places all at the same time? The second domain is competition, right? Who do we compete with and how? Now, the traditional view of competition was very black and white. You are a competitor or a partner. It's very focused on industries, right? Within an industry, you're competing with other companies who look like you. Today, we see much more asymmetric competition. We see companies competing with other businesses that have entered with a completely different business model. We see, think of hotel companies competing with Airbnb. At the same time, we see companies competing with their own partners, right? Book publishers are fighting for leverage with Amazon every day, just as much as news publishers are fighting with Facebook for who really controls what you see and when. It's not a black and white distinction. So you have to learn to balance this much more fluid definition between cooperation and competition. The third domain of strategy we have to rethink is data. Now, businesses have always used data, but traditionally data was part of how you operated your business, how you kept track of things, how you measured results and performance. It was much more operational. Today, data is becoming a key strategic asset, something you have to invest in for the future, something that's actually going to lead to new value creation in the future, whatever your business model is, and is going to be critical to your next stage of products and services. Innovation has to be rethought, right? In the pre-digital era, innovation was typically driven from a lot of analysis, a lot of careful, teamwork and group problem solving and sort of senior leadership who really knew a problem. That was the role of an innovation leader, coming up with that big bet on where we're going next. Today, innovation is very different. It's simply too risky to just make those big bets based on what you think is where the customer is going, where the market is going. And so the only way you can actually survive in this level of upheaval, what we've learned from these small, digital, fast, resource-poor companies we call startups, is to be continuously testing and learning as cheaply and as fastly as you can. It's a process I call rapid experimentation. And lastly, value. We have to learn to rethink our value proposition. Now, traditionally, your value proposition was defined by your industry, right? If you're a newspaper, well, what do? You deliver the news on paper, right? Very clear, it's defined by your mission, and then you focus on executing. How do we do a great job? Today, that question, why do I exist as a business? What is my value to the market? Is something that is continuously needs to be re-examined, rethought. Because if you wait too long, someone else is going to come along and come up with a better value proposition that displaces you while you're looking at your great profits and success that you had in the old world.
Great. So a lot of this, I have a question for you, and please continue to send in your questions for us for the end of the webinar. All of this data, do you think a lot of companies are collecting a lot of data that they're not even sure yet what they're going to use it for, but they're kind of culling it as it goes along?
Absolutely. And generally speaking, I would say it's very important. I mean, you have to think, of course, about what kind of data you're gathering. If it's personal data around customers, there are other considerations in terms of how much do you want to take on, because there's risk. So it's a risk-reward balance. A lot of the data you're gathering, though, is about what's happening inside your operations of your business. Applying the Internet of Things, it's really having an impact on assets and factories. There's a lot of data that will simply help you understand how your business and your market is operating better, and how to predict things like where should we open our next retail location.
Right, right. Because I was looking through the book last night, and I just wanted to say this quote. It said, all too often when a business hits upon success in the marketplace, a dangerous complacency sets in. As Andy Grove warned us years ago, in the digital age, only the paranoid survive. And I really do love that quote. It reminds me of another professor who said the most dangerous words in the English language, Willie Peterson said, are, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Yeah. So really, these 5 domains are really showing that in a way.
And I would say, from my work with companies and the companies who come to take our programs at Columbia, what I see is it's actually harder to change when you are successful. Yeah. It is much easier to make this kind of a transformation if you are really shaken up and you have immediate short-term threats.
Right.
Whereas if you're doing sort of pretty good and pretty profitable for the next 24 months, it's much harder to easier to fall into that complacency trap and harder to make the longer term adjustments and shifts in strategy that you need to be doing.
Right. Well, that leads us to my next question. So that being said, these successful companies, historical companies, old legacy business that have been successful, have they been able to change their strategy and compete with, today's Silicon Valley giants?
Right. That's the big question, because if you go out west and you ask that, people will say, "Oh, these old legacy companies they call them dinosaurs.
Yeah.
They're just going to go extinct. There's no transformation for them." And we've certainly seen examples of companies that have been successful and unwilling to change. Kodak, Blockbuster, etc. The famous ones we always hear about. But I think we are starting to see now that companies get it. And they're serious, and we're starting to see some of these old legacy organizations that are not just dabbling. They're not just running a pilot project or putting up a website. They are really thinking about the future strategy of their business. Just a few, for example. Walmart, not that long ago, was a giant retailer with a website, Walmart.com. They are really seriously now investing in how do we think about omni-channel. Just as Amazon is moving from selling purely online to now buying Whole Foods, Walmart is saying, how do we get the incredible asset of all our physical stores and the online channel to work together? They're buying talent, they're acquiring some of the hottest, smaller startups in e-commerce, and they're saying, let's do things, let's experiment, let's have the people who work in our stores drop off delivery products on their way home using Uber-like mapping systems. You've got Ford Motors and other automakers. They're not sitting back waiting for the Silicon Valley folks to invent the driverless car of the future and turn them into a supply, parts manufacturer. Yeah. They say, we're going to figure this out too. We understand the future of our business is not car manufacturing, but mobility. And they're making those kinds of investments. You look at, NASDAQ and other financial services players who are really doing some pioneering things in blockchain technology, the technology behind Bitcoin. We had NASDAQ in one of our programs last month talking about a whole series of innovations they're exploring for how you can change the efficiency of financial services using that same technology. Look at media companies. I mentioned the New York Times. What about Disney, right? Everyone talks about Netflix and how they're spending $8 billion this year, I think, on content, and what a huge content creator they are. It's impressive, but Disney has some pretty good content too, right? And they're shifting their strategy now. They say, look, we've got Star Wars, we've got Marvel, we've got all this Disney content.
Pretty good content.
We've got some pretty good content brands. We should create our own streaming platform. Right. So that's what they're building now. Even a recent example I saw from the National Institutes of Health, right? We hear a lot about how startups, West Coast companies are rethinking health and innovation, saying, let's take all this data on our smartphones and other places, learn how to track and predict the flu, to understanding people's mental health and shifts in their mood and their propensity towards anxiety. The NIH is now investing in exactly this kind of strategy. They've recently announced All of Us. It's a new initiative. They're going to gather data from 1 million or more Americans, tracking their DNA and their health data over a decade or more, all anonymized, but to create this incredible data set. Exactly what I'm talking about, data as an asset. They don't know what they're going to do with it yet. Right. There's some initial ideas they put in the grants, but the key idea is they're actually going to crowdsource the experimentation. They're going to have every university, even high schools around the country, coming up with new scientific experiments. What could we do with this data? What could we learn? What health challenges of the future can we explore? So really forward thinking on their part. And I think we're going to continue to see more of these kinds of organizations with really bold strategic thinking now about where their digital future lies.
So these legacy companies, are they going, is it seeming like their vision for what their company is going broader? Are they trying to lift up above the clouds and be a much broader organization, or do you think they're actually being more specific about it's because it doesn't sound like they want to change the entire company.
I think, it's just going to depend on the firm. And sometimes you may be broadening, you may be pursuing new business models and saying, we're going to get into some, so Ford, for example, instead of just the car, not that they aren't going to manufacture cars, but we're going to look at both products, right? But also services, right? So you can think of that as a broadening. Disney, I wouldn't say they're broadening. If anything, they're maybe taking on a different role in what I talk about in the book as a competitive value trade. So they're extending, saying, why do we want to rely on others always to sort of be that final touch point to the customer? In the old days, you had to. If you Coca-Cola, you don't bring me my bottle of Coke.
Right.
Somebody else does it.
Yeah.
You're Disney, you don't deliver the Mickey Mouse to me. There's broadcast companies and movie houses.
Right.
But now that that's possible, companies like Disney are saying, wait, what if I could have a more intimate, more direct relationship with the customer, just like these highly successful digital platforms have done.
It's thinking differently with the loss of constraints.
Absolutely.
That's what it really
Recognizing
is.
the constraints have been lifted and actually saying, hey, I could actually do different things than I ever could have in the past. And that's why we didn't do them. Not because it was the wrong strategy for us. It just wasn't really feasible.
Right. Now it is. Yeah. All right. Your latest book called The Digital Transformation Playbook. Is there a playbook? What does it consist of?
Is there a playbook? So I called it that, the book, because I do try to provide, first of all, some practical frameworks to help companies and executives understand these shifts, right? What do we mean? What exactly has shifted in our strategic thinking around data, innovation, et cetera? So within the chapters, there's a series of ideas, models for understanding things like what is a platform business model and how does that specifically impact competition? What is the difference between network effects that are same side or cross side, between disintermediation and intermediation? So there's a variety of sort of analytical, if you will, frameworks and tools in there to help understand what's going on in your industry. But secondly, there are a set of planning tools. So these are more applicable to a specific question. How do we define where our value proposition for our different customer segments is going over the next few years? How do we measure the threat posed to us by a disruptor who's entering our industry? These kinds of questions. The point here, though, is it's a toolkit. Don't go through them A, B, C, D, E. Pick the ones that are relevant to you. Your business, what are the challenges you're facing right now? What are the opportunities you're trying to pursue? What are the questions you have? Understand that first. Only you are going to know that. Right. And then say, okay, which of these tools might be helpful? And hopefully a few of them will help you to work through and answer a particular question that really matters to your business.
Right. And the use of this book is to not be literal, but to be conceptual. That's really the modern way of running a business and thinking.
Right. Give you the concepts, and then you are going to put them to use to get your business where it needs to go next.
Right. Great. All right. I have one final question, and then we will turn it over to you with your questions. But last, I'd like to offer the people who are with us today some practical advice. I know that you wanted to give that to them too. So what role does a leader play, and how do they specifically set the digital transformation in motion?
Right. So leaders are critical. I think setting in motion is a good way of thinking about it. It's not that the leadership team is going to figure everything out, right? And sort of map out, here's our 5-year plan or our 10-year plan in the traditional, old General Mills, General Motors, General Electric of the mid-20th century sort of model. The leader has to set a mandate for change, has to provide that urgency, right? Only the paranoid will survive. Right. And then there's certain things they need to do with their team to get things started and then enable change to happen within your organization. So I'd say you have to start with a vision, right? Where are we going, right? And this is both as an industry, right? Where do we believe our industry is going, and where are we going within that, right? So where do we think the news industry is going for the New York Times, and where do we see our place in that future of the news industry, right? Which may be very different than the Wall Street Journal or USA Today, et cetera. So where are we going as an industry and as a company? And then strategy of how are we going to get there, right? Okay, we're not there yet. This is where we see ourselves being. Let's be honest about where we are today. What are the strategies we need to pursue to get us there? And then how are we going to actually finance that, right? Let's have frank conversations about what I call the value drivers. Are you generating more financial value through new products and services and customer experiences? Is it through operational efficiencies and reducing costs? Is it through adding new business models, new sources of revenue? Really getting a sense and about the time scale of that as well. Because if you don't think about where the revenue, the impact is coming from and the timing of it, you may overinvest and break the bank and then you're going to get forced out by activist investors, or you're going to take too long and you're going to be surprised that the real results don't arrive when you expect it. Once you have that kind of leadership view in place, you've got to empower the organization. You can't tell them this is what I need you to do, but by the way, I'm still holding you accountable with your quarterly reports based on the old business model, right? So you've got to look at metrics. What are we measuring? You've got to look at talent. Who are the people we're hiring? How do we engage them? You've got to look at funding. How do we pick and give money to all these different initiatives and projects and ideas that people may have? That will then set loose the people in your organization who are going to be waiting for the opportunity to get on board this train. And lastly, you need some sense of governance, right? What is centralized, what's decentralized? Do you have a chief digital officer overlooking this? Is it a CEO-led committee? So that all the parts are working together to some degree. But again, if the leadership can put this kind of roadmap together, I guarantee you people in your organization are going to be excited to move forward into the next stage of your business.
Yeah, it sounds very energizing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very energizing prospect of losing the constraints of the past and being able to think differently. I think that's very exciting for people within an organization, that it isn't just up to the leadership to be driving this, but you're driving it, customers are driving this. It's very holistic.
Absolutely, and the customers have to be involved. When you're actually looking at this vision, where the company is going, and then you're a manager trying to say, okay, I'm going to build a project, it's got to be hand in hand with the customers. What do we think is really going to change the customers, mobile experience of how they, solve a certain problem that we've never solved for them before. Now we're going to be a part of that, part of their journey.
Right.
How do we actually make sure that it's relevant to them? Again, that comes back to those innovation processes that are not about planning it all out and coding it, building and handing off the product, but getting that customer feedback
and demanding buy-in. Yeah, exactly.
Getting that customer, that market feedback from the very beginning, using these lean startup methodologies, but translating them so they actually work within an enterprise and not 3 people in the garage.
Right. All right. So we have time now for some questions. Would you like to take some questions?
Absolutely.
All right. Let's look at our first question here. This comes from Hillary. She says, do these examples strategy differ for the not-for-profit world?
Great question. I would say no. The approach that I talk about in the book should be very much applicable to nonprofits. I even have some examples of nonprofits in it. It really is focused on organizational strategy. I mean, customers, as I define them in the book, and my third book as well, The Network is Your Customer, it's not necessarily about an end consumer of a paid product. It's a key constituency. That may be your business partners. It may be your end consumers. It may be voters. It may be community members you're organizing. You still have to think about all these shifts that are happening. The only difference is, when I'm looking at that roadmap, some of the steps are going to be different, right? So financial return is absolutely critical, but it's a little different. It's not about profit margins and EBITDA. So your metrics are going to be different. But the big picture about shifting your mindset first and thinking about what is your value proposition going forward, I would say is absolutely the same for nonprofits.
And, with you saying a cheaper way more inexpensive way of collecting data, gives that opportunity to all.
Absolutely. And the capability is what's happening with data and with a lot of these technologies around it is, as everything moves into cloud-based services, you don't necessarily have a big advantage or sort of insurmountable, well, I'm small, I'm a nonprofit, I don't have a lot of money. That's what Amazon Web Services did. They took away this whole barrier to launching a digital strategy. They said everything you want to start, you can pay as you grow. So you can start with very small and paying a little bit. And if it actually grows, we'll scale you up and deliver you all the capacity you need.
Right.
And that's where the sort of technology has gone, which again makes it accessible to all kinds of organizations.
That's great. Okay, let's take another question here. All right, from Lucio. Is there a risk in going too digital in an industry that does not require it yet? Or if customers are not prepared? That's a great question.
Great question. I love the word customers is included in that. So first of all, yes, you want to look from the customer point of view. So, I have a slide when I'm giving a keynote speech on this book, and I always show very early on, which just says digital transformation is not about technology. Right. And that's like, if you take nothing away, that's the whole book, like boiled down into one sentence. Don't get caught on some sort of hype train of like, well, we need an artificial intelligence initiative. Well, we've got to be Internet of Things. Well, we need big data. That's what tends to happen. So it's not that it's too digital, but it's sort of technology driven. Whereas for me, digital is all about market driven, customer driven. So if you're actually starting with the customer, their needs, their behaviors, I think you're going to avoid that trap, which Lucio is mentioning. The other thing that's really important, to be honest, is to think about time horizons. There's a certain enthusiasm and a buzz, and maybe again from the technology vendors, everything has to be done this year. It's like, oh my gosh, you have to build everything this year, and the whole world is going to change within 12 months, and there'll no longer be employees, and it's all going to be chatbots. A lot of these things are playing out, autonomous cars, a lot of things, their impact is real. but they're happening at different time horizons, right? It's not that we've gone to pure driverless cars in 12 months or 24 months.
Right.
So you need to think about, for your industry, the shift you're saying, that vision of the future, what's happening in 1 to 2 years? What's happening in 3 to 5 years? What's a definite risk or possibility that would be very important to prepare for, but isn't really going to happen until 8 or 10 years?
Right.
And make different kinds of investments in those, right? So treating everything as if it's on the same time horizon is one of the biggest mistakes I see companies making in terms of actually operating around a digital strategy.
It sounds like just the fact that he mentioned customers in his question, he's
on the
right path.
He's on the right path.
That's good.
Exactly.
All right, let's take another question here. Manish Mishra, what comes first, the capabilities or the change in mindsets to go digital?
I would say if you're going to prioritize, mindset first, because capabilities are essential, but to know what capabilities are most important to you, you need to start thinking about where your business is going. So the capabilities that Ford Motors needs to invest in versus Disney needs to invest in versus a retail chain like Dominos, which has gone through a tremendous transformation, are somewhat different. Right? It's not. It can be a little bit like technologies. You get a checklist where we need to have analytics, we need to have this, we need to have that. Probably need everything on that list, but different companies, some of those are more. How many people do you really need who are data scientists? It's going to depend. So you need to shift your mindset, think about where your company is going, and then that'll help you figure out where do we really need to invest in these capabilities.
Right. Good, good. All right. We have time for another question? Yes. All right, from Natale. How can we help leaders get a transparent and realistic view on what their digital transformation needs are? What's most relevant to them and their customers?
So this is part of the process that my colleague Steve Blank, who teaches here at Columbia as a famous entrepreneur and theorist of entrepreneurship, talks about, is customer discovery. Mm-hmm. You've got to get the customers in. You've got to actually get the unvarnished voice of the customers about your current business and products and services and what you're delivering, but also the new ideas that you are considering or pursuing, or the problems that you think they have that you think you're going to help solve for them. You've got to get their voice in, and the key thing is to pull out all the separations between the customer and the top decision maker. If you've got your junior market researcher who's out there in the field talking to customers and saying, "Oh my God, they hate our products," or "Oh my gosh, they're really not interested in this thing that we're building," and they've got to write up a report and send it to the senior director of market research, who sends it to the vice president of insights, who takes it to the CEO. It's not going to work.
It becomes watered down by that point.
Yeah, the CEO needs to be, well, there's a million, at each stage a reason has been added to say, well, this might not be representative, or they don't understand how good it'll really be. Whereas if the CEO is in that room when the customer is responding, they can say, really? That's what they think? They pose the follow-up question. So you want to flatten that distance between the ultimate decision makers, and maybe depending on the project or initiative, that might not be the CEO, the ultimate decision maker and the customer themselves.
Right. Great. Do we have time for one more question? We have one more question. Great. From Lorenzo. Can we get in tune with an atmosphere of radical change by building a roadmap to success out of digital transformation? How is leadership supposed to be focusing on being agile?
Right. So that roadmap, I would say, is critical to helping us cope with this change. Right. So one of the things it does is, I would say the most important thing it does is it gives you a focus. Right. Where do we take all this energy or this urgency? And instead of just going off in a million directions, how do we figure out what do we actually need to be building or trying, or at least testing, experimenting? But it also can turn, frankly, anxiety, talking about radical change, Lorenzo says, and this atmosphere, from sort of fear or anxiety, or like where are we possibly going to go, towards a sense of purpose and direction inside the organization. And I think that's really critical for the leader. And what I try to stress in the book is it's a difference between giving that sense of direction, where are we going and why, and this feeling this need to say everything we're going to do. Right? We don't need a leader to tell us everything we're going to do. Right? That's the wrong path to take. Leader needs to set that direction. And as I talk about, the key skill of leadership now is asking the right questions. right? How do we say, this is what we really need to figure out?
Right.
We don't have the answers, but these are the 3 of the 5 most important questions to the future of our company as an insurance business, our company as a television network, our company as a food retailer. These are the most important things we have to learn and understand about our market, about the customers, about where the world is going. And if you can frame and define those really critical questions and empower people in your organization to go out and experiment and pursue ideas, and really from the point of view of learning where the future of your business exactly lies, rather than saying, oh, that's all known now. Here's where we're going. You just have to execute it.
Right.
People will feel more empowered, and you'll actually get a lot more value out of your entire team and your organization.
Great. I think that's a great final answer for us today. I would like to thank everyone for joining us. Thank you for your questions. And David, I'd like to thank you for being with us today. This has been very interesting.
Thanks very much, Scott. It's been great to be with all of you. And I hope to hear from you. If you're interested in the book, it's out in 6 languages now around the world. And also the English version, you can download a chapter on my website, digitaltransformationplaybook.com. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Have a good day.